Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Edison. Is it Gomez-Krauss?
Gomez-Krauss, just call me Edison, it's fine.
Thank you so much for joining me, Edison. And I hear that you're running for MSJC Board of Trustees. And what area are you running for again? Can you please give us a background about yourself?
Yes, District 1 for the trustee board is Temecula, Anza, Awanga, Idlewild, all the mountain communities, all the way up to Beaumont, Cherry Valley, Banning, Cabazon, and some of Whitewater. It's a fairly large district. A couple of years ago, I was appointed to the Anza Valley Municipal Advisory Council. That was my first real political position. I was appointed by Supervisor Chuck Washington as the youngest member of the community council. It's municipal advisory councils are sort of like faux governments, but we advise our county supervisors on all matters unincorporated regarding unincorporated communities. I became chair of that committee, and I simply got politically involved. I'm a teacher myself, an educator, so I want to do everything I can to make my communities better. And just this year alone has been such an insane year. A lot of things have kind of unraveled in our society, and I feel like we have to do more. And I'm in a position where I can. I have a lot of free time in the afternoons, and I've been working with just community groups, outreach groups. I work with a group up in Los Angeles called the Sidewalk Project, helping the unhoused population. I have a farmers association out here in Anza where we're setting up a community garden, just trying to improve the world that we live in. And seems like a great opportunity to do just that for college students. I, as a college graduate myself, know the hardships that some of us can go through juggling school, work, family. And I want to bring that perspective in. I feel like a lot of the trustees we have, and I'm not throwing shade at the trustees, but it's just a lot of these boards are so invisible sometimes. I know a lot of students at MSJC who don't even know that there is a trustee board, and that's who they should be serving. I know we serve a community at large, but the students are the priority. So I want to run for them. I want to give them a voice. I'm younger, and I have it's easier for me to communicate many times with the student body, and I want to do that. I want to give these students a voice, everybody.
You said you were an educator. What did you teach?
I do teach. I teach ESL online. I've been teaching it for about 5 years now. And prior to that, I was teaching English privately in Mexico to rural communities in San Quintin and Ensenada. But lately, I just got this. It started as a side hustle, just teaching Chinese kids overnight, and it just developed into a full-time job. And now I'm teaching 8 hours a day, and I've fallen in love with education, and obviously pandemic kind of got in the way, but my next path in life is actually taking pulling a master's in special education or language teaching as a second language. Sorry, I messed that up, but yes, that's so. It just education is something that I've always been passionate about. I feel most of our society's problems can be fixed with education. We can use all sorts of fancy words with the trustee boards, like answering district growth and managing the budget, but you always have to do that. Regardless of talking about them, you're doing them. What's not being done is focusing on the reality that we're living through. And right now, unfortunately, yes, this pandemic has exposed the fragility of our society. We kind of grew up in this bubble where racism didn't exist, sexism didn't exist, that LGBTQ plus people were wholly accepted in our society, and suddenly there's an outbreak of a virus, and the most fickle and simplest of racist insults towards what they call Orientalism, towards our Southeast and Eastern Asian communities come out, and then it comes out to Black communities and brown communities. It's never gone away, and that's infecting our education system, all the way from kindergarten to superior education, and we need to stop it. We need to put a complete stop to that, and that's why I want to influence our education system to look like us, to sound like us, and answer our questions. You can't live in this delusion where these problems don't exist. You can't fix a problem that you're unwilling to accept that exists.
Where did you grow up?
All over the place. I'm originally from Chula Vista, San Diego County. my father in particular is an entrepreneur, so he set up an aquaculture farm in San Quintin, which is a rural community south of Ensenada, about 5 hours south of the border. So I grew up as a foreigner in my own country, per se, and I came back to the US to finish high school in Chula Vista. Then I moved up to Anza. Again, I spent some time in Mexico, which gave me a pretty good perspective on what it's like to be a foreigner in well, it's weird because I'm a US citizen, but my family's Mexican. But growing up in Mexico, I was treated as an American, as an outsider. And then I come back to the US and I'm treated as a Mexican, not like someone who was born outside the country, but I'm not. So I have a pretty cool, not pretty cool, a pretty good perspective on what it's like to be an outsider. And I like that. I like that because that's what Californians are. We're a beautiful melting pot of cultures, and a lot of us come from all sorts of places. And even though I'm the son of legal immigrants, when I talk to people who are the children and they themselves undocumented immigrants, they lived a whole different experience than mine. So I'm always open to that because I sort of lived it, but not the same. So I want to hear from them. And that's something that, if you don't mind me ranting a little bit, I talked to at a previous interview about the Board of Trustees and how they address the issues that our students face. They talk about bringing in experts to address racial and sexual equality and inequalities, disparities. And I mean, the experts are already there. There is no better expert on being a woman on campus than the women that are on campus. There's no better expert than growing up an LGBTQ plus student in MSJC than the LGBTQ plus students at MSJC. And if the list goes on, for undocumented immigrants, for Black kids, Asians, and everything. So that's what I want to hear. And that's what I want to see my board representing. I want to see the board addressing these individual concerns.
This past June, MSJC released the new Equity Pledge, committing to support the diversity of its students and communities. What has MSJC done since then to support the pledge's commitment, and what can we expect in the near future?
So if you ask me, not much has been done, to be honest, other than, and I'm very much against virtue signaling. And I love signing pledges that we're going to destroy racism in our country and whatnot. But we have to start looking for small gains. And a lot of these pledges like these don't really get much done other than to somehow decry something that we all know is wrong. But how do we fix it? You know, you have, I believe about 70% of MSJC students are Latinos. And they have some of the largest dropout rates in MSJC. MSJC has an average like 27% graduation rate, which is okay for California, but it's pretty miserable if you think about the fact that 1 out of 4 students graduates. Juggling work and school is really hard sometimes, and that burden falls heavier on communities of color. It always has. We need to start understanding why students are dropping out, because that should be the main concern. Why are they dropping out? Following through with them on how we can help them stay in school. Every single MSJC student that I've talked to that has dropped out not because they're stupid, not because they don't want to go to school, it's because they can't, because school is too far away. I'm in Anza, the Mount San Jacinto campus is about an hour away, you know, and that's 2 hours commuting. That's, if you have a kid, that becomes harder. If you have a job, it becomes 1,000 times harder. And if you have both, well, then you're screwed. And you have to choose between life and school. And you shouldn't have to. I understand that we have to maintain a certain level of prestige, but I believe community colleges should be there to serve the community and making sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to finish their studies. And I know, for example, the Riverside County supervisors recently released, I believe, like $400,000 to K-12 districts for Wi-Fi hotspots. And that's something that I would like to see happening and that was CARES Act money. So that's not really even Riverside money, that's CARES Act money. I would like to see that happen for community colleges as well. Right now with the pandemic, we use distance learning as a remediary tool, but it should be a tool that we always have accessible for rural communities, for transient and unhoused students. I mean, if I know people who live with their mom and then they get kicked out and they live with their aunt, and now they're 40 minutes away from campus, and they shouldn't have to choose between not being able to go to school. And that's one way to do it, like giving them access to those tools. It's not that hard, it's not that expensive, and it should basically come with your welcome package to MSJC, always having those options there with you. And I don't see that happening. I don't see a push for that happening. I see pushes for stadiums, which are great. You want the sports teams to play, for campus expansion, sure. But I want to make sure that the students who are already there stay there, finish, and succeed in life.
What do you have to say about mental health?
Well, that's a pretty broad subject just to say something. I mean, it's something that needs to be taken seriously. Just as it talks about racism and discrimination, it's delusional to try to solve a problem you're not truly willing to accept exists. I know you have a very good club that it's called like Open Minds or
Active Minds at MSJC.
Active Minds. I heard one of their members speak, and I thought it was beautiful the way he was addressing issues. But I know their club is like 20 strong, and I don't know that any of the trustees have ever attended any of those clubs to actually listen to the students talk about their mental health issues. Mental health is, again, since it's such a broad subject, it can go from mild depression to full-on suicidal thoughts to simple. I mean, and it's intersectional in a million ways. If you consider, if you're an LGBTQ plus student and you're not willing to come out or you feel that society is going to judge you, it's affecting your studies. The school itself needs to, as I mentioned, work for the students. And if you're going through something, teachers and staff need to be compassionate, they need to be empathetic, and they need to work with you. Not just like, well, I'm sorry, she's not cutting it. No, you're not. Yeah, not against you, and understand that you're coming from a place of, especially this year. I mean, this year was heavy on everybody, even the strongest mentally. I mean, it's hurting all of us. It's hurting all of us. We're being away from family. I mean, humans need like 3 hugs a day just to function. And now we can't hug our loved ones. And if we do, like for the next 15 days, we're like, how should I have hugged them? And that's put in very simple terms. I know these are very serious topics I shouldn't be joking about, but I mean, we all cope in our own ways, right? But no, yes, definitely should be addressed as a principal issue, just as racism, just as discrimination of any sort. It's a form of discrimination if you think about it, It's ableism of sorts.
Are there any plans to represent and support other minority groups such as Native Americans, Asian, South Asian? I identify myself as South Asian because my parents are from India, and American Samoans.
If I may, you said I could take all the time I want. So I'm going to go into a little bit of my backstory. I tend to use the moniker of the punk rock politician because I grew up on punk rock, and it was always a community of inclusion. It was always a community of outsiders. And when you mention minorities, we're all in it together. Okay, so California, yes, we've got a boatload of Mexicans. Yeah, I'm one of them. But if I go to Louisiana, I'm a speck on the map. And I recognize that. I recognize that we're all afraid of being stereotypical. And we want to break those molds, but at the same time, we don't want to break from our own communities. And I totally get that. I live right next to the Cahuilla Reservation. I'm friends with many from the Cahuilla Reservation, and I hear them. First of all, I will openly say that no one is illegal on stolen land because I live right next to the tribe. I've heard from them. I understand their plight and how the community is aggressive towards them. They treat them like outsiders on a land that was theirs thousands of years before any of us came here. And again, as I mentioned, the pandemic has brought out the worst of our society in the cruelest of moments. It's first, as you mentioned, you identify as South Asian, and it's in my youth, I never saw racism towards the Asian communities, other than some off-putting jokes, typical stereotypes of drawings and whatever. But it just brought the worst out of people with the whole Wuhan flu and China virus. And it's like, wow, I didn't know it could be this horrible. And every single minority, and that includes the disabled community, this includes the LGBTQ plus community, this includes people with mental health problems, because ultimately you are a segregated part of society, not segregated, but isolated part of our community. And we all live under that threat. The fact that I didn't know that people could be so hateful towards Chinese people, well, you know what? I kind of do, because I've seen people yell at my mother for not speaking English at Target. And I know how they can be very, very hateful. I've seen how they treat my Black friends. I see how they treat everybody. And we're all living with that risk. So yes, I plan to, if I'm there, I will represent every single minority. And that includes, I don't want to exclude our Caucasian brothers and sisters, because they are, there are populations of Caucasians that are technically minorities as well. When we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, when we're talking about people with mental health problems, they are also discriminated against, not because of the color of their skin, but because of the situation they're living through. So I want to make sure that MSJC is a safe space for, not just a safe space, that is a space that encourages people to thrive and be themselves, to push them to reach their greatest potential, and it's just, I want to encourage people to be better and to not be afraid of being themselves. So that's who I am and who I will represent. I will always represent the small guy, the little guy. In my last interview, I also mentioned that I ran for supervisor previously, and we got about 9,000 votes. I'm from Anza. This is the most conservative corner of the most conservative county in Southern California. 9,000 people said yes to this guy that's talking about LGBTQ plus inclusivity, about BIPOC communities, about mental health, about harm reduction policies, about needle exchange programs, that sex work is work and we gotta respect people no matter what they're doing, because it's an uncomfortable topic for some people, but I guarantee you that some people are working their way through MSJC with an OnlyFans account. And you know what? We gotta empower every single person and to do what you gotta do. And if we have to have those conversations, let's have them. It's not enough to just call every isolated incident an isolated incident. We have to be proactive. We have to make sure that we have a bold stance on anyone who discriminates anybody in any aspect of their life, that there will be serious repercussions for their actions, like that there's zero tolerance for those actions, and make it widespread. And not just some motion on parliamentary procedure, like, oh yes, we decry racism, good, we're all done, racism is gone. No, put flyers all over the campus saying that if you see it, you call it out and we do something about it. There is no room for that, especially in a learning environment. There's no room for it in life in general, but in a learning environment, I teach K-12 kids, particularly the younger ones. I teach from 5 to 10, sometimes 15-year-olds. And every single aspect of learning has to be positive, or else it's not sticking. We don't change when we turn 20, 30, 40, or 50. Still, learning needs to be something that we want to do. And if we feel discouraged in any way, we're going to back down. It also goes hand in hand with having teachers that look like you. That's also something that's very powerful for especially the younger ones, but it still applies when you see in college, like if you don't have teachers that look like you or think like you, like what do you want to do? Who am I going to be? If I don't have those role models. I was lucky enough to have my parents, they're great role models, and I had great teachers throughout my life. But everybody needs to see that. Everybody needs to see that you are beautiful and you will succeed, and that there's room for you on the other side of graduation, and there's a reason for you to graduate. Because otherwise, it's like, if nothing's going to change, why am I wasting my time with college?
What can students expect from MSJC in 2021 in regards to online learning and the pandemic?
All right, so that's my area of expertise. Constant revision of the method in which distance learning is imparted. That's one of the most important aspects of distance learning, is constantly revising how students are learning, because for the most part, distance learning has been used for webinars, language classes, but not advanced courses like whatever you're seeing at high level biology and chemistry. So how students learn that has to be, it's kind of like when you're watching those marketing firms and they're doing brainstorming sessions. They need to find out what works and what doesn't, because some things are easier to learn in a Zoom classroom, sure, but I know in your case, like at STEM, you need labs. You need to be in a lab. So how are we going to recreate a laboratory in your home, on your computer? How are we going to make sure that you are getting an adequate education? So I would say constant revision and a lot more feedback. Like it's not just we're not gonna bring in, if it were up to me, we're not just bringing in some outside firm to give us, here's the software, run it, and best of luck to you. No, again, it has to be feedback from the students, the people who are learning, the people who are not learning, and they're gonna tell us why they're not learning or why it's boring. Boring class sucks, and nobody wants a boring class. You want to learn, you want to enrich your mind and your life. So we have to make sure that happens. And the only way to do that is with feedback, like any relationship. If it's a personal, a friendship or a business relationship, there needs to be feedback. And that would be my priority, making sure that we're hearing from you and all your classmates, what's working, what's not, and working to fix it.
Will we see more technological integration and training with Canvas and other software used by the school? Will there be more physical equipment and supplies provided to students, such as chemistry or biology lab kits?
Me not being a board member as of now, I can't guarantee that, but I would guarantee you that if I were, we would have to fight for that, definitely. That's tricky. I do think to a certain extent, we can reduce classroom sizes to make sure that all students can be in a room at the same time in a safe distance. That would be an option. I mean, we do have to explore options there. I can't give you a straight answer on that one, to be honest. That is something that would need to be done. I do believe some classes are easier online than others. So I guess they would have to be prioritized, as I mentioned with the feedback. Like, how can we make it so you can feel like you're in there?
Last question. What can MSJC do for students and teachers struggling to balance life and school at home because of distractions they can't avoid, such as the COVID pandemic?
We need to improve the students' odds at succeeding. That should be the main goal of MSJC, period. And that's done through, improving racial equality, through equity-minded training for teachers so they can understand where their students are coming from. I think that's mostly a problem. And this is something I've spoken to a lot on this campaign trail, is a lot of teachers and faculty members aren't necessarily bad people. They need to know who we are and where we're coming from. In the past, I hadn't met many Muslim Americans. It just, the way my life was lived, I didn't have any Muslim friends. And recently, I've been working on a campaign for a congressional candidate up in Southwest Riverside called Lima Mara, 42nd Congressional District. Super cool dude. He does have my endorsement. And a lot of he is a history professor in Middle Eastern studies. So a lot of his students are by nature of Middle Eastern descent, and a lot of his students are now working on his campaign. So I'm now hugely exposed to the Muslim community. And first of all, they're super cool. And I've gotten to know more from their side of life. And it's just interesting because their celebrations are so similar to Mexican families, but in a way, like worlds apart, an ocean apart. And if we know more about the way they live their lives with their family, we can know more about what they want to achieve in life and what their limitations are. As a Mexican, we are very family oriented. I care about what my mom thinks. I'm 32 years old. I really care what my mom thinks. And Muslims are very much the same. They're a tight-knit community, very family oriented. So I think we need to understand every single one of our communities, all the separate communities, and just embrace them. They're not going anywhere. You can hate them all you want, but they're not going anywhere. So we might as well embrace it and just love each other a little more. All of this boils down to reaching out to students. That's the only way you're going to change things. You can't bring in focus groups. You can't pay outside consultants. You can't look it up on YouTube. they're sitting outside your office right now. They're your students. And I know because they're actually coming into campus now. So yes, they are outside your office. They're out there. You have to talk to them. And it applies to every single level of office. If you think about it, if your president, your congressman, they need to get out there on the streets and talk to the people of the district. In this case, yes, it would be important to speak to others in the district, not just the students, because you have to talk to kids in high school. What are their expectations coming into college? What are their limitations coming into college? How do they see themselves? What do their parents, depending on their cultural background, what are their expectations of them? Some families may be more lenient to giving you a sabbatical year. Some may want you to get in there and get done. So understanding all of these different values in our community, these subcultures within themselves, that's what we need to do. That's the only thing the board needs to do. It's really not that hard. It's just they have to do more aside from attending a meeting once a month, going through Robert's Rules of Order, and motion to adjourn, and they're done right there. That's not the job. And if you want that job, just sit on some other committee somewhere else. But this one, there are people's futures at stake. It's not just their lives, it's their future. And I just feel like they're half-assing it, to be honest. And you can't do that. You can't do that because students are not half-assing it. They're whole-assing it and more. They're working, studying, living their lives. Sometimes if they have families, they're juggling family life. And you just walk in there without a care for them. And they're the ones we should be working for.
Thank you so much, Edison, for joining the Talon for this interview. Guys, that was Edison Gomez-Krauss. He's running for Board of Trustee Area 1, and this is the Talon Co-Editor. This is the Talon Co-Editor Mahak Tiwari. Thank you so much for having us, Edison. Thank you so much for this lovely interview and chat, Edison. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahak.